Welcome to a very solid introduction of foundational hand. As you can see on this example, I'm going to be explaining the DNA of a modern Carolingian lowercase alphabet to understand the characteristics of this writing and how we can identify that we are building a really consistent alphabet. This knowledge is really good not only for calligraphers, but for graphic designers wanting to understand more about our Roman letter forms, and also for typeface designers who want to understand the construction of our lowercase alphabet and how we identify each stroke of the letter forms and where the thin and thicks are and why. Okay, let's go. So I'm going to start by using a guideline. A guideline is a reference for me to set up the different units of my alphabet. So let's zoom in here. Okay. This guideline is based on a few things. The first off is that we have this section called the X height, which is the main section for our writing. Then we have a section which is the ascenders and the section with the descenders. What are these four squares? These four squares mean the width of my own writing tool at 90 degrees. So my current writing tool in here is a Brause nib 3 millimeters. And if I position the pen at 90 degrees, I obtain 1, 2, 3, and 4 widths of my own pen. So 3 times 4, I have 12 millimeters for the X height. If your tool is not 3 millimeters, is bigger or smaller, that's fine as well. You just need to build a guideline. You need to build a scale that is proportional to your own pen. 4 widths of your own pen for the X height, and then 2.5 for ascenders and descenders, as you can see in here. The next movement is the angle of the pen at writing. It's called CANT, cant, but I rather not to use this word because my pronunciation might get a little bit funny. So let's go with the position of the pen at writing, which in this case is 30 degrees. If you want to use these blank calligraphy guidelines, you can download it from a link provided on the description of this video. Which is going to take you to my email newsletters. Once you sign up for them, you will receive a comprehensive PDF file with a set of blank calligraphy guidelines. Now, I'm going to start by attaching a paper on top. In this case, is a bleed-proof paper. So if you want to also know about materials in the same PDF file that I'm offering you for free, you will find a visual list of recommended materials for each different calligraphy style. So you're more than welcome to join me and to download the file. And if you want to learn more, you are very much welcome to be on board and join any of my calligraphy courses that are pre-recorded and self-paced available for you. Okay. Now, as you can see, let's do a little bit brighter. Okay, I can still see the lines underneath. So I have a guide for writing along the same baseline and the same X height, the ascender height and the descender height. So I have all the measurements in here. Okay, let's start really slowly. So I'm currently using Walnut ink and my Brause nib, and I'm gonna start by dipping the pen, and the first movement I have to do, which I'm gonna measure in here, I'm gonna mark the dimensions of my X height so that you see where I'm at, and the baseline and the cap height, not the cap height, the X height. Okay, this is how tall are going to be my letters. This is the base, this is the X height. Now, with my writing tool, if I was going to start writing, and let me bring a folded paper to protect the page from my own hand. Excellent. Okay. If I'm gonna start writing and using the pen like the mark you see in red, parallel to the X height and parallel to the baseline, top to bottom, stop. Okay. Again, the pen is parallel to the X height and I move down as straight as I possibly can do, and stop. Now, when I said the angle of the pen at writing is 30 degrees, means that this position is 0, and now I'm gonna go higher. I still see the mark underneath my paper for the 30 degrees, so I'm gonna follow it, and I make a mark, more or less 30 degrees, as you can see here. And now, keeping the same angle, I'm gonna start from the top and bottom, stop. So you see the mark is showing the 30 degrees angle, first of all. Okay. And the second consequence of writing with this pen angle is that my stem, which is the vertical stroke I just created, is slightly thinner than the other two. Excellent. Now, what are the properties of the DNA of this writing? The properties are that everything is very round. It's based on a Romanesque construction. So you can visualize Pisa, the building, in your head, and you will see that it's really, really round. And this is one of the characteristics. I'm placing the pen just below the top of the X height, and then I'm going up and rounding, as if I'm holding a golf ball on my left arm, and I'm rounding again if I'm holding another golf ball on my right arm. So you can imagine that when I turn around, this is the space inside my arm, and I have a very, very round golf ball, and this is the space below my right arm and holding another golf ball. So it's a very, very round movement. Now, the second thing is that this is not a symmetrical movement, means that the entry point, again, repeating the same movement with the same pen positioning, the entry point is shorter than the exit point. So when I exit, it's slightly longer. It doesn't have to be so wide as the one I just did now, but it's going to be slightly longer. So you will see that there is a difference between the entry and the exit, and this is to help us with legibility. Of course, I need to place the dot or the tittle of the I with the same angle of my writing. Okay, so if I take an X-ray of this letter form, this is my entry point, and from here I go round, down, round again, and exit. And my exit is longer than my entry point. Okay, and this is done with one movement. Excellent. Now, let's move into the second letter. I'm gonna go through a few very, very basic letter forms. So the next one is letter N. For letter N, I'm starting in the same way I started letter I, 30 degrees. I'm going up and rounding, and straight down, stop. I'm positioning now the pen in the exact same position I started with the first stroke of my N. So you see that the positioning is the same and the angle is very similar. I'm going up, rounding, down, and longer exit. Okay. So when I look at this letter form, I identify a couple of things. The first thing is that the entry point of the I is the same as the N. And the second element is that the exit of the I is the same as the exit of the N. So these two elements are connected to each other. Now, what about the width? What about the width inside my N? So a good reference point is using your own tool, and this time using the tool at 0 degrees, so parallel to the baseline, parallel to the X height, and fit it inside my N. 1 and 2. Okay? So if your own tool can fit nearly twice inside the counterform of your N, that's a very good measurement for the width. Now, once we have that, the next big challenge is to apply the same optical width into the following letter forms. I'm running out of ink with my fine liner. Okay, so I'm going to now write the letter letter M. So letter M, I'm going to start with the same positioning, 30 degrees just below the top of the X height, and stop, starting in the same positioning with the same angle, and then looking at what I just did, open up, down, and repeat another shoulder, same positioning, open up, down, exits. Things that are in common again, the entry point of my M is the same as the N, the exit point of my N is the same as my M. The width is very, very similar between them. Very similar. So they are related as well in the movements and in the counterforms they are creating. Okay, so if I now write the word mint, I'm going to start with reproducing or writing another I as I did before. So same pen positioning, going up, going down, exits. Now I see the space is too large, but is okay. So I keep on going and assess. Okay, now I have an N for mint. So again, I start in the same positioning, a little bit closer this time, rounding and down, stop, arching and creating a very similar arch to what I created before. Exit. And then I'm going to write a letter T. So with letter T, I'm just going to position the writing tool right on top of my X height, right on the top. So my pen positioning is resting on the top of the X height, and then I'm going down and rounding. And then from here, I go to the left and push to the right, exit. Now, what happens? What happens is that the space inside the letter forms are also informing the space between pairs of letter forms. So I think this is pretty good. And this could be a touch smaller and this could be a touch smaller. And that is okay because things are going to be improving as we go, as we understand what we are doing, the space inside and the space in between. So these are just notes to self. Okay. Now we have the I, the N, and now we are going to write another control character, which is lowercase o. With lowercase o, we have to keep this width of this letter form in mind because that's going to be very similar to what we do now with an O. With a letter O, we are going to create the letter form using two individual strokes. So I'm going to place the pen roughly at 30 again and just below the top of the X height. And from here, I'm going to create a half moon. So, or half an orange, I would say. I'm going rounding, down, up, and stop. When the movement gets thin, naturally by the angle of the writing, I stop. And you see, I have half of an orange in here. Now I go back to the initial point and I go up, down, and close. Now, in my opinion, this O is too much of an orange. I went slightly too much below the baseline and too much above the X height. It is okay to have an area that goes slightly below and slightly above. This is called overshooting in typography. And we need that as well. But I have the feeling that if I look at the counterform of this N and I look at this O, it's too much, it's too wide. So I want to translate this in here, and I find that this can be a little bit narrower. So let's do it again. Okay. So I'm placing the pen at 30 degrees, just slightly below the top of the X height, and I'm going around, up, and I'm going around, up, and closing. And it's a little bit better. I still think it's a little bit more, it's slightly too lemon. shape, but I am actually much happier in this situation because I can see how this counterform now relates a lot more with the DNA of this counterform. This pen is struggling today. Okay. All right. So let's try to put a few words together. So not a few words, but I'll try to put one word together. So in Spanish, the word coconut is actually coco, only coco. It's probably the only word in the entire Spanish dictionary that is shorter than an English word. I'm kidding, but normally English is much shorter than Spanish. So in this case, is the only case that maybe it's not. Now, I'm going to write a letter C, starting the same position as I started my letter O, slightly below, rounding. And when it gets thin, I stop, and now I bring the eyebrow. I call this an eyebrow because it's a very similar shape and movement of an eyebrow. Now, this C is open. That means half of the letter C is already working as the space between letters because it's very, very open in between that. That means I have to keep this in mind for now spacing purposes. So I'm gonna start in the same position, roughly 30 degrees, just below the top of the X height, and I'm rounding. And then the other half moon, and I'm closing. And now that I'm in here, I have to create the other C and the other O. Let me move slightly to position myself better. Okay, what about the spacing? So if I count the space I created here between the C and the O, I have to allocate a very similar or optically similar spacing between these pair of letter O, C, rounding, eyebrow, stop. Again, half of my C because it's very, very open. The aperture is really open. It's going to work as a spacing already, so I need to visually allocate. And then my second O for Coco. From here, rounding, up, and closing. Okay? Now, if I look at this O, I'm very happy because it's a lot less lemonade. As you can see here, a lot less lemon, and it has slightly straighter areas, which I think they are a really great pair for the N that I created beforehand. And then this is now the space between my C and my O. This is now the space between my O and my C. And what I'm trying to do is creating optically equal spaces. And this is again between my C and my O. And the counter spaces are really similar and are working in harmony with this letter N. So the DNA of the alphabet is coming along based on the control characters I, N, and O that I have written so far. Excellent. This is a very good introduction to foundational hand, starting with the humanistic lowercase letter. And if you want to learn more about this type of writing, there is a course that I published recently called Introduction to Foundational Hand, where I'm covering the lowercase alphabet, the Modern Carolingian or the humanistic letter, and Roman capitals written with a broad pen like this one. So sometimes you will find the name schematic Roman capitals, meaning that is done with this type of pen or similar without adding serifs. All right, thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you again soon.